You ever have one of those days where your wife asks you to do one simple thing, like just one, and somehow your brain says, hey, let's ruin the whole day? That was me. She told me, Nate, handle just one thing today. And I said yes way too confidently, like a man who clearly didn't understand the assignment. That's your first hook, because anytime a husband says, I got it, that means absolutely nothing is getting got. I woke up thinking, I'm gonna show her I'm responsible. I had no idea I was about to start a chain reaction that would look like a documentary on poor decision making. I should have known things were going wrong when step one, just remembering what she told me, already felt like a group project where I was the group member who didn't read the message. So I'm standing in the kitchen, trying to figure out what she meant by just one thing. And that's when you realize wives don't give instructions, they give quests. Like, she's basically sending me on a mission with riddles. She wanted me to pick up one thing from the store. Easy, right? Except I got to the store and immediately forgot what the thing was. Now I'm walking around like a lost child. The groceries speak to me. I buy everything except the one thing she wanted. I come home proud, putting the bags down, like, look at all this stuff I got. And she just looks at me like, I ordered the wrong item on purpose. That is the moment you realize you messed up absolutely everything. But it doesn't stop there. No, because husbands can't mess up quietly. Everything becomes a dramatic event. I tried explaining myself, which is always a huge mistake. Well, technically I did bring things, and that's when my wife starts blinking slowly. The blink that means you're not making it to tomorrow. And honestly, she's right. At this point, I'm apologizing for stuff I didn't even do. I'm apologizing for the future. I'm apologizing for hypothetical mistakes. But somehow, she still finds it adorable that I try. It's like watching a puppy attempt algebra. I put in effort, but there's no real chance of success. And in closing, I told her, next time, give me two things. That way, at least if I forget one, I'll accidentally get the other. She didn't laugh. She did the slow blink again. So I just stood there nodding, holding the one thing she wanted, which she eventually had to go buy herself. But hey, marriage is teamwork. She remembers everything. I'm here for emotional support. Even when the emotion is disappointment. I thought saying, I got this, would make me look like a responsible husband, and that's where everything went wrong. My wife asked me to do one simple thing, and I nodded confidently, like a man who had just solved world hunger with minimal effort. That's the first trap you see whenever a husband says, I got it. It's usually code for, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll look confident in what? While failing, I walked around the house, that morning thinking about how impressive I would look when she got home. I imagined her opening the door, smiling at my competence, maybe even a little impressed by my adulting skills. Vision lasted about 30 seconds. Even before I left the house, my brain started questioning everything. Did I really understand what she asked? Was it literally one thing? Or was it a metaphor for a larger, unspoken task? I stared at the laundry basket for a moment, wondering if folding the towels counted. That's when I realized overconfidence is a dangerous thing. I grabbed a pen and paper to write down exactly what she wanted. Somehow the list made me more confused. It had bullet points I didn't understand, sub-points I didn't know existed. Suddenly, her simple request had turned into a project I might need a team of engineers to complete. I left the house trying to act normal, carrying the air of competence, like it was a shield. Every neighbor who passed me probably thought, wow, that guy's got his life together. And I just smiled, nodding, knowing the truth was far messier. That little nod of confidence felt like a setup for a joke the universe was about to tell me. It didn't disappoint. My overconfidence, my complete misjudgment of how simple one task could be, my naive belief that I could handle it without chaos set the tone for the entire day. It was a perfect storm of ambition, ignorance, and comedic timing, all wrapped up in what should have been a 5-second request. Once I left the house with that false sense of confidence, the next step hit me like a brick wall, actually understanding what she wanted. She said one thing, and my brain immediately turned it into a complex puzzle. I started questioning every possible interpretation. Did she mean one item from the store, one chore in the house, one life decision I had to make correctly? I stood in the middle of the living room, holding my keys, thinking, maybe if I just wing it, she'll be impressed by my effort. That's the trap. Winging it sounds good in theory, but in practice it's like trying to juggle knives blindfolded. Even walking to the car felt like a mental obstacle course. I kept repeating the instruction in my head, hoping I'd remember it, but instead, my mind kept generating alternative interpretations. Could it be this? No, probably not. What about this? Nah, that would be too obvious. By the time I actually got in the car, I was already exhausted from overthinking a request that was supposed to be simple. That's the beauty of this kind of comedic disaster. Every small, overanalyzed thought adds tension and makes the inevitable failure even funnier. Then came the store. I walked in with purpose, scanning the shelves, and somehow forgot entirely what I was supposed to buy. Wandered up and down the aisles like a confused tourist, picking up random items that seemed useful at the moment, but had nothing to do with the original request. Even considered buying things she didn't need just to fill the gap, thinking maybe quantity would make up for quality. Meanwhile, my confidence was slowly slipping, replaced by panic disguised as determination. Every aisle was another test. Every glance from another shopper made me feel like the protagonist in a silent comedy sketch, performing a task I was doomed to fail spectacularly. By the time I left the store, my original goal was a distant memory. I had one cart full of things I thought were helpful, none of which were what she actually asked for. They're smart. The missing interpretation had already set the stage for a day of escalating comedic chaos, and there was no turning back. Walking out of the store with a cart full of everything except the one thing she asked for, I already knew I had crossed into full-blown disaster territory. I imagined her reaction before I even got home. That's where the comedy really starts, the anticipation of judgment. I was pushing the cart down the sidewalk like a man who had accomplished something monumental, when in reality, smart, I had successfully collected a random assortment of items that might as well have been for a completely different household. Every step felt heavier because I knew deep down that the one thing she wanted, the single item that had been explicitly mentioned, was missing. Even unloading the groceries became a performance. I tried to casually place the bags on the counter, hoping she wouldn't notice. She did notice, of course. She has a way of scanning the room and instantly assessing every success and failure. That first look, the blink that says, "You really thought this was enough," hit harder than any critique I've ever received. In that moment, I realized the comedic timing of failure is perfect. It's not just the mistake itself, it's the way it lands in front of an audience who already knows the story. As I tried to explain myself, I stumbled over words, listing all the things I had bought, hoping sheer volume would cover for the critical omission. I even used phrases like, well, technically, I did get some useful items, which in hindsight sounds like the desperate words of a man performing emotional acrobatics. Every item in the bag became a character in this unfolding comedy. The wrong cereal, the incorrect fruit, the extra snacks that seemed useless. Meanwhile, the dog wandered by, silently judging me with those big eyes, clearly entertained by the absurdity of my effort. By the time I finished unloading, the house felt like a stage set for humiliation. Every misstep, every forgotten item, every awkward justification was amplified by the anticipation of her reaction. The humor lies not just in the error itself, but in the buildup, the tension, and the small, silent cues that make the audience, my wife, the dog, and me, completely aware that the disaster is unfolding exactly as predicted. Coming home with all the wrong items, I was fully bracing myself for the inevitable judgment. You ever notice how one glance from your spouse can say more than any words ever could? That first slow blink, the one that silently communicates disappointment, disbelief, I told you, Sal, hit me like a ton of bricks. I tried to act casual, like nothing was wrong, placing the bags on the counter and smiling confidently, but the room had already transformed into a courtroom, and I was the defendant in a trial I didn't understand. Every wrong item in those bags suddenly felt like evidence of incompetence. I was powerless to defend myself. I started explaining, which is always a terrible idea. I listed everything I had gotten, hoping the sheer volume would impress her, but instead it sounded like a desperate plea for forgiveness. I got some snacks, a fruit, and this cereal seemed healthy. I stammered, and she tilted her head, raising an eyebrow in that way that immediately cancels out any credibility I thought I had. It's the subtle art of comedic humiliation, the silence, the look, and your own realization that the more you try to explain, the worse it looks. I was tripping over words and logic simultaneously, and the dog was watching from the corner, clearly judging me silently, probably wondering how humans even survive adulthood. Even simple tasks like putting groceries away became an ordeal. Every item seemed to rebel, falling out of my arms or rolling off the counter. I felt like I was performing a high-stakes juggling act with things that had a mind of their own. The tension wasn't just in the chaos of the kitchen. It was the anticipation of her words, her glance, the judgment that I knew was coming. That slow blink, the silent critique, a layer of comedic suspense that made my every action feel both urgent and absurd. Each moment, from fumbling with the bags to trying to stay composed, was a perfect mix of tension, anticipation, inevitable laughter that only comes from watching a man spectacularly fail at the simplest task. By the time I realized how badly I had messed up, I was already deep into damage control mode. I started apologizing, not just for what I did wrong, but for all the hypothetical mistakes I might make in the future. I was talking faster than my brain could process, trying to explain that technically some of the items I bought could be useful, even if they weren't the one thing she asked for. That's the funny part about being a husband. When you fail loudly, dramatically, and with full commitment. Every word I said seemed to highlight my incompetence, but somehow it also made the entire situation more comedic. I tried to inject humor into the chaos, which was a risky move. I said things like, well, at least we'll never run out of snacks, hoping for a small chuckle or a smile. But all I got was a slow blink that could have been used in a thriller movie to communicate disappointment, judgment, mild exasperation all at once. And that's when I realized the true comedy of failure. The more you try to justify, explain, or charm your way out of it, the worse it looks, but the funnier it is to anyone observing. Even the dog seemed to lean in, watching with wide eyes, silently narrating the disaster in progress. Every attempt to organize the groceries, to make it seem intentional, only made things worse. Items toppled, bags split, and I felt like a circus performer in a very low-budget act where I was both the star and the punchline, kept narrating my own actions under my breath, trying to rationalize, but really just adding commentary to my own failure. The tension in the room was both palpable and hilarious because we all knew there was no recovering from this particular disaster. The absurdity, that combination of effort, chaos, and judgment is what makes these moments so memorable. The storytelling lies not in the perfection, but in the spectacular, painfully relatable way everything fell apart despite my best intentions. By the time I was done apologizing, explaining, attempting to salvage my dignity, it became clear that the real lesson wasn't about groceries, lists, or following instructions. It was about surviving the day with humor intact. Every spilled item, misstep, and awkward justification had built up to a point where the kitchen felt less like a place to cook and more like a stage for a comedy sketch. Stood there, surveying the chaos I had created, and couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. They're smart. There's something incredibly relatable about trying to do something simple, failing spectacularly, realizing that effort matters more than perfection. Even in the middle of the disaster, small victories emerged. Managed to get most of the groceries inside without dropping anything else. Avoided any trips to the emergency room despite juggling slippery bags. I maintained some semblance of composure, though the dog's judging eyes never left me. I tried to narrate my own actions like a live commentator, explaining the thought process behind every move. That only made the comedy richer. Every attempt to fix one mistake seemed to create two more. That's where the Nate Bargatze style humor really shines. It's not just the failure, it's the chain reaction of chaos that makes it hilarious. Finally, the most important part was seeing her reaction. Not anger, not frustration, but a mix of disbelief, amusement, and the slow blink that says, "You're lucky I love you." That's subtle. Silent communication adds tension, humor, and relatability because everyone watching knows the story is both a disaster and a triumph in its own strange way. Standing there, the middle of a kitchen full of spilled food, misplaced groceries, and lingering panic, I realized that sometimes the story isn't about getting it right. It's about trying, laughing, somehow walking away still standing. Every misstep became part of the narrative, every small disaster a punchline, every awkward apology a chance to bond over the humor of life's little catastrophes. So yeah, I tried to do one simple thing for my wife, and somehow I managed to turn it into a full-blown disaster. Forgot the one thing she actually asked for, bought everything else under the sun, and spent the rest of the day apologizing like it was my job. The kitchen looked like a tornado had hit. The dog was judging silently, and I was trying to explain myself in ways that only made me sound more ridiculous. But somehow, amidst all the chaos, there's a little magic in failing spectacularly. My wife didn't laugh at first, but she survived, and somehow we both made it to dinner without starting World War Hoodoo. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not about being perfect, it's about showing up, giving it a try, laughing at yourself when life hands you chaos instead of simplicity. Ever wake up thinking, today, I'm going to be productive, Yeah, that's always the exact moment trouble starts. So I look at this doorknob in my house that's been slightly loose for a week, and I think to myself, I got this? How hard can it be? And right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the hook the moment I said those words. I signed my own sentence. Because the universe hears confidence and responds with, hold my screwdriver. I grab my tool, which is literally the only one I can identify without reading a manual. I march toward the bathroom like I'm about to save lives. Except the only life I'm saving is my pride, which, spoiler alert, doesn't survive. I start fiddling with the screw, feeling good about myself. And just like that, it slips out of my hand and disappears behind the wall like it had a better life to live. At this point, panic sets in. You know that feeling when you try to act calm, but your brain is screaming, we are in deep trouble. Yeah, that. I tried shaking the doorknob, twisting it, whispering to it, even like maybe if I spoke nicely, it would behave. But no, the universe wasn't listening. The doorknob falls completely off, both sides, and I'm standing there holding two sad little pieces of metal, like trophies for my failure. Comes the part every man fears the moment you realize you're trapped in your own bathroom. You yell for help, and they're smart, but you have to pretend like you've got it under control because you already told your wife you could handle it. She opens the door, sees me standing there holding the broken doorknob pieces, and gives me the look. The one that says, really, this is your plan? And I just shrug because what do you say when your DIY project turns into a hostage situation? So we call a professional, and here's the kicker, the guy fixes it in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I spent a solid hour dismantling my dignity, 2 screws and half a doorknob. He comes in and restores order in less time than it takes me to make toast. And the look he gives me, calm, knowing, slightly pitying, is exactly the reminder I needed. That's the hook. Someone else fixes it effortlessly while you reflect on all the ways you messed it up. And now my life lesson, which I follow religiously: if a doorknob is broken, I don't touch it. I stand back, respect its limits, and call someone who knows what they're doing. Because the truth is, I didn't just try to fix a doorknob, I created a story. Disaster and a life lesson all at once. And that's Nate Bargatze's kind of victory, small, hilarious failures that somehow make the story worth telling. You ever wake up feeling like you're suddenly a competent human being? That's really where the trouble begins. You roll out of bed, stretch, and for no particular reason, your brain convinces you that today is the day you'll be productive, heroic, and capable of handling life's minor inconveniences. That's how I felt when I looked at the bathroom doorknob that had been slightly loose for a week. I thought of myself, I got this. How hard can it be? And right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the hook. The moment I said those words, the universe leaned back in its chair, smiled, and whispered, hold my screwdriver. Confidence is such a dangerous thing. It gives you the illusion of control, the belief that you are in command, while quietly setting you up for total humiliation. Nate's style is all about these relatable, everyday moments where your own mind becomes the first punchline in the story. There's something inherently funny about overconfidence. You can see it in the way people approach any simple task. Pick up a tool, any tool, and suddenly your posture changes, your chest puffs out. You act like you've spent years mastering the craft. You're convinced that the tiniest bit of skill or knowledge is more than enough. The hook here is that overconfidence often disguises complete ignorance. I held that screwdriver like it was Excalibur. They're smart, like somehow the tool itself would give me the knowledge I lacked, and the audience immediately relates to that feeling moment when you think you know exactly what you're doing, even though you have no clue. Then comes the internal monologue, the quiet desperation you try to hide. You tell yourself, okay, just a little turn easy. But deep down, a tiny voice in the back of your brain is already whispering, this is going to end badly. And that's exactly what makes it funny. They're smart. Nate's humor thrives on that tension. The audience knows disaster is inevitable, but the storyteller keeps pushing forward anyway. Smart. There's a charm in the innocence of your own hubris, the way you think for just a second that this is manageable. That moment of misplaced confidence is the hook that draws people in, because we've all been there. We've all stood over some simple task and convinced ourselves we are experts only to be proven hilariously wrong. You also have the social layer of humor. When your spouse or partner looks at you and asks, "Are you sure?" you hear it as a challenge. Not concern, not curiosity, but a direct test of your manhood, your competence, your ability to handle a slightly wobbly screw. That small, simple question becomes part of the setup for the joke. Your pride inflates. You nod, you say, "Absolutely, I've got this." And that's the hook. The moment your words commit you to disaster, the audience can see exactly what's about to happen before you do. Finally, there's the physicality of confidence. You move toward the doorknob with purpose, like you're stepping into battle. You tighten your grip on the screwdriver, adjust your stance, and maybe even take a deep, dramatic breath. All of these subtle actions communicate to the audience that the story is about to explode. Overconfidence is not just a mental state, it's a visual one. Every move you make tells the audience, disaster incoming. Nate's comedic genius comes from highlighting these tiny human moments, the swagger, the misplaced certainty, the pause before the fall, because that's where laughter begins, in the anticipation of the inevitable. So the stage is set. Overconfidence isn't just the first step, it's the hook, the tension, the spark that ignites the entire story. It's relatable, it's funny, and it's exactly what makes watching someone attempt a simple task so irresistible. After convincing yourself that you are fully capable of handling the situation, the next step is always grabbing the tool. Here's the funny part. You always grab the one tool you actually recognize. In my case, that was the screwdriver. The universe is laughing because this is the tool, but it's also the only one you actually understand at a surface level. You hold it like it's a magic wand, believing that simply touching it will make you competent, when in reality, it's more like holding a ticking time bomb with a fancy handle. Nate's comedic style thrives on this exact tension, the confidence we feel versus the inevitable chaos lurking just around the corner. The audience sees you grasping the screwdriver, puffing your chest, taking on the problem like a hero who hasn't actually read the manual. And they know disaster is about to strike. There's a ritualistic confidence in the way people handle the tools they know. You pick it up, maybe inspect it, adjust your grip, and suddenly feel like a master craftsman. You walk over to the doorknob like you've been trained for years, but in truth, your experience is limited to, I've watched a few videos once. The hook here is in the juxtaposition outwardly. You're calm, precise, heroic. Internally, your brain is screaming, "Abort mission! Abort mission!" That internal panic is what makes the story relatable and funny. Everyone has held a tool at some point, thought they could handle a job, and then immediately regretted it. Then comes the first twist of comedy. You start using the tool with confidence that is completely unwarranted. You twist, you wiggle, maybe even give the screw a little pep talk. There's an almost theatrical quality to it, as though the screwdriver and the screw are participants in a delicate dance where one misstep can ruin everything. Nate's humor shines in these subtle exaggerations, the way ordinary objects suddenly gain personality and become actors in a story of escalating chaos. The audience is hooked because they are already imagining what could go wrong, and they know it will be funny when it does. Another layer of humor comes from the struggle between pride and reality. You feel obligated to keep going. Even as the tool slips, the screw resists, and your confidence begins to falter. You adjust your stance, rotate your wrist, maybe even reposition your feet like you're trying to physically influence the outcome. The hook here is that your actions become more dramatic and absurd the worse things get. You are performing a one-man comedy show, and the props just happen to be household tools. And then comes the inevitable moment where the tool betrays you. It slips, it doesn't fit, or it makes a sound that signals impending disaster. You blame the tool, of course, because it's easier than admitting your own lack of skill. This is a classic Nate moment. The humor comes from misplaced confidence, the absurdity of self, delusion, the audience's ability to recognize themselves in that same situation. By the time the tool has completely failed you, they're smart, you're left with a mix of embarrassment, disbelief, and a growing sense of dread. And that's exactly where the hook works. The audience is already laughing at your predicament, knowing that the story is far from over. The simple task was doomed from the moment you picked up the screwdriver. The tool becomes a symbol of both your overconfidence and the chaos that's about to unfold, setting the stage for the full-blown disaster to come. Comes the moment every small DIY disaster has been building toward: the disappearing screw. You're twisting it, feel like you're making progress, confident in your expertise, and then suddenly it slips from your grip and vanishes into the abyss behind the door frame. And not just behind the door frame, like it's hiding in a corner. No, it disappears into some mysterious pocket of the universe, as if it had a better life to live without your meddling. The hook here is instant. Both panic and comedy collide. Nate's storytelling genius thrives on these moments because they're universal. Everyone has experienced that sinking feeling when something tiny, seemingly insignificant, turns your whole plan upside down. The audience instantly relates, laughs, and cringes at the same time because they've been there too. At first, you try to play it cool, like losing a screw is just part of the plan. You kneel down, slowly inspecting the floor, pretending it might have bounced innocently somewhere nearby. You check behind the toilet, under the rug, along the edges of the tile, like a detective investigating a crime scene. The hook is in the absurdity of these actions. The audience can see how irrational they are, and that tension between what you think is plausible and what's actually happening makes it funny. Nate's humor often relies on the contrast between human overconfidence and simple reality, and this is a perfect example. Then comes denial. You tap the wall, whisper to the screw, shake the doorknob gently, even mutter, "Come on, man, stay with me here." You're bargaining with a piece of metal, which is inherently ridiculous, and the audience is hooked because the ridiculousness escalates with every small action. This is classic Nate. He draws humor from relatable human folly. And here, the folly is both immediate and universal. Everyone knows the frustration of a tiny object escaping your control and turning a simple task into an ordeal. As you continue your frantic search, the panic grows. You check behind other objects, shine your phone flashlight into cracks, even stick your hand in places you know logically the screw could never fit. And still, it's gone. Smart. That's where the hook doubles. Now the story is building tension and comedy simultaneously. You are trapped in a loop of futility. The audience is laughing at your growing desperation, anticipating what will happen next. Every failed attempt to retrieve the screw adds to the narrative. Nate's style is all about escalating ordinary problems into extraordinary, hilarious experiences. Finally, acceptance begins to creep in. You start rationalizing, convincing yourself that the screw didn't matter anyway. You tell yourself, it was just a tiny screw, probably not essential. The hook here is that everyone knows this is a lie. You needed that screw. The doorknob is teetering on the edge of total collapse. The audience feels the tension between what you're telling yourself and the inevitable consequences. Dissonance fuels the humor. And just when you think it can't get worse, it does. The missing screw becomes the first domino in a cascading disaster. The doorknob wobbles precariously, the latch misaligns, and suddenly you're holding pieces of metal in your hands, wondering how a single lost screw turned a simple home repair into a full-blown catastrophe. The hook here is perfect. Something incredibly small causes massive, relatable chaos, keeping the audience hooked, laughing, and cringing all at once. Just when you think the situation can't get any worse, it does. That's the cruel magic of trying to fix something simple. You've already lost the screw. Now the doorknob decides it's had enough of your meddling. 1 second it's barely hanging, and the next completely detaches from the door, leaving you holding both sides in your hands like some failed magician showing off the remnants of a trick gone wrong. The hook hits immediately. The audience can picture it. They feel the suspense. They're laughing because they know exactly what that moment looks like in real life. Nate's humor thrives in these moments of relatable calamity, where everyday objects suddenly betray you in the most absurd ways imaginable. There's a very specific panic that comes with holding something that used to be functional, but now exists only as broken pieces. You stand there, looking at the doorknob, trying to figure out if it's possible to put it back together without creating a bigger mess. You twist it gently, you rotate it, even whisper apologies to it, hoping it'll forgive you and magically reattach itself. The hook here is obvious. The more ridiculous your attempts to fix it, the funnier it becomes. Everyone watching can relate to the absurd mental gymnastics we perform when faced with our own mistakes. Nate's storytelling shines by amplifying these small human behaviors into laugh out loud moments that feel painfully authentic. Then comes the social embarrassment. You're standing there half bent, holding broken metal in your hands, hoping no one saw you make this disaster. But of course, someone does. Your spouse or partner walks in, sees the wreckage, and gives you the look that says, really, this is what you thought you could handle. And that, my friends, and they're smart, is the hook that elevates the story from a physical mishap to full comedic glory. It's the human reaction, the silent judgment. That turns a doorknob disaster into a moment of universal relatability. Next, there's the desperate problem, solving phase. You try to reassemble the pieces, line them up, wiggle the screws in, hoping for a miracle. You're talking to yourself, pacing, perhaps even shaking the door gently, trying to coax it into submission. And the hook is in the absurd escalation. Every step you take to fix the situation only highlights how completely unprepared you were for it. The audience is fully invested at this point, laughing at the tension between your earnest effort and the inevitable failure. Nate's genius is in letting us live in that tension, amplifying the small frustrations of everyday life until they become hilarious stories. Comes the physical comedy of being trapped by your own failure. The doorknob now completely broken, the latch misaligned. You're locked in your own bathroom, which somehow makes the situation even more ridiculous. You try to open the door with fingers, elbows, even the edge of the broken knob, but nothing works. The hook here is perfect. The combination of helplessness and absurdity keeps the audience laughing while cringing at the scenario. They know how small actions can snowball into massive chaos, and they're hooked because it's painfully relatable. Every little detail adds layers to the story. The wobbling doorknob, the clumsy attempts to fix it, the internal panic, the silent judgment of those around you. Each element is a hook, drawing the audience deeper into the narrative, amplifying the humor while keeping the tension alive. Nate's storytelling excels here, turning a minor home repair into a full-blown comedic saga where ordinary objects become characters, your pride becomes collateral. They're smart, and the audience can't stop laughing because they've all been exactly where you are. Just when you've fully accepted that you are the architect of your own domestic disaster, help arrives in the form of a professional. There's something inherently humbling and instantly comedic about watching someone walk in, glance at your chaos, know exactly what to do without hesitation. The hook strikes. Immediately you've spent all this time struggling, panicking, and improvising, and now someone casually dismantles the problem in a way that makes you question every decision you've ever made. Nate's humor thrives on that contrast, the clumsy, frantic amateur versus the calm, efficient expert. It's a combination of awe and embarrassment, all wrapped into a moment that's as relatable as it is hilarious. Watching a professional work is almost mesmerizing. They move with purpose and precision, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of tools. Every twist of the screwdriver, every adjustment of the latch, executed with confidence that you can't help but admire and secretly resent. The hook here is in your internal commentary. You're simultaneously impressed, humiliated, and laughing at yourself for thinking you could have handled it alone. Nate's style captures that exact human response, recognizing your own folly while marveling at someone else's skill. There's a subtle psychological layer too. When the professional glances at you, you get the look. Not anger, not judgment, smart. Just calm, knowing, experienced acknowledgement. That glance is its own punchline. It communicates, I've seen this before. Yes, you're the classic case. And that's the hook. The audience instantly connects with that moment of silent, mutual understanding. You are undeniably outmatched. And it's funny because it's true to life. Everyone watching knows the feeling of being rescued by someone who makes things look effortless, making your own struggles seem simultaneously absurd and relatable. Then comes the rapid resolution. While you've spent countless minutes, or maybe even hours, fiddling, panicking, and attempting improbable solutions, the professional fixes the doorknob in 5 minutes flat. Just like that. The hook here is in the timing. The audience can feel your suffering, your desperation, and the painstaking buildup. Watch it dissolve instantly with a casual flick of the wrist. It's a perfect comedic beat, highlighting the gap between human overconfidence and real skill. Nate's humor often shines in these contrasts, the exaggerated buildup of tension, followed by a quick, almost anticlimactic resolution that leaves everyone laughing. Your role in this scene shifts instantly. You go from active participant to observer, standing awkwardly, holding broken pieces, and watching a master at work. There's a humility in that transition that is inherently funny because it's so universal. Everyone has had that moment when you realize someone else can do in minutes what you've been struggling with endlessly. All you can do is stand there, part impressed, part ashamed, part laughing at your own ineptitude. Even after the professional leaves, the memory lingers. The doorknob is functional again, but the experience becomes a story, lesson, and a joke all rolled into one. The hook is the lasting impact. The audience is reminded that overconfidence is dangerous. Small mistakes can snowball into disasters, and professionals exist for a reason. Nate's comedic style turns all of these elements into laughter, relatability, and storytelling brilliance. The rescue, not just a solution, but an essential part of the comedy itself. After the professional has worked their magic and restored the doorknob to its rightful place, a new reality sets in, one that's both humbling and, oddly enough, empowering. The hook here is immediate. You've witnessed the contrast between chaos and competence, between fumbling and precision. Leaves a mark. Suddenly there's an unspoken rule in the house: some things are just not for you. Tools, screws, latches, doorknobs. These objects now have boundaries, and you are clearly on the wrong side. Nate's humor thrives on these subtle realizations, taking the audience through the absurd yet relatable evolution of a man learning the hard limits of his abilities. It's funny because everyone recognizes themselves in that moment, that instant when pride meets reality and reality wins. From that point on, approaching any broken item comes with caution. You glance at the toolbox, your fingers itching to intervene, but the memory of the lost screw, the dangling doorknob, and the professional's effortless solution flashes in your mind. The hook strikes again. The mere sight of tools or hardware triggers an internal dialogue of fear and hesitation. You imagine repeating the disaster, and the humor lies in the hyper-awareness of your past mistakes. Nate's comedic style captures that self-consciousness perfectly, highlighting the tension between curiosity, impulsiveness, survival instincts. Social reinforcement plays a major role as well. Family members, neighbors, anyone who witnessed the fiasco now observe your interactions with household tools with a mix of amusement and quiet relief. Every glance, every casual comment, every sigh acts as a gentle reminder: stay away. The hook is in the subtle humiliation combined with shared understanding. The audience can see the ongoing joke, how a single failed attempt at a simple repair can ripple through your life, changing how you approach ordinary objects. Nate's storytelling thrives on this. Everyday experiences into extended comedic arcs that resonate with anyone who has ever overestimated themselves. You also develop a new role in your household. You become the planner, the observer, the person who calls in expertise rather than diving in headfirst. There's an ironic empowerment here. By stepping back, avoid further disaster, preserve your dignity, and gain control over chaos without touching a single tool. The hook is in the reversal of expectation. Humor comes from the fact that you thought competence meant doing it yourself. But true competence, it turns out, is knowing when to let someone else handle it. Nate's comedy excels in these inversions, where the punchline is life itself. Every future DIY task becomes an exercise in patience and delegation. You watch professionals, you give advice, you even comment on proper technique, but you never touch the tool. The audience laughs because they see the universal lesson: humans are fallible. Some tasks are better left to those trained for them. The memory of your previous fiasco fuels the humor, creating an ongoing comedic narrative that extends beyond the original disaster. The hook is in the permanence of the lesson. The way a small failure becomes an enduring story, a recurring joke, a gentle reminder of your limits. Finally, the doorknob, once a simple piece of metal, becomes symbolic. It represents humility, the consequences of overconfidence, and the way small events can snowball into memorable experiences. Every glance at the restored hardware evokes a mix of amusement, respect, and a little self-deprecation. The audience is drawn into the narrative because they recognize the absurdity of ordinary life, the lessons hidden in minor disasters, and the comedy that emerges from our repeated, imperfect attempts to control it. Nate's genius is in turning this small object into a story that entertains, teaches, resonates with everyone who has ever tried and spectacularly failed to fix something simple. So after all that chaos, and because the reality, I didn't just try to fix a doorknob, I accidentally created a full-blown disaster, tested the limits of my own confidence, and proved once again that some things in life are better left to the professionals. The funniest part is that it started with such a simple idea, just a little fix, nothing big, and somehow escalated into a story I'll be telling for years. The lesson: overconfidence can turn the simplest tasks into epic failures, and that's okay, because at least it makes for a good story. Really, isn't that life? You try, you mess up, someone else fixes it, and you get to laugh about it later. So now, whenever I see a loose doorknob, I step back, smile, let the grown-up handle it, because some victories are just meant to be observed. You ever try to fix something simple and somehow ruin your entire day? Yeah, that's pretty much my spiritual gift. So the other morning, I woke up feeling confident, which is already a red flag in my life. I told my wife, I'm gonna fix that loose bathroom handle. And she looked at me the same way you look at a toddler holding a chainsaw. Are you sure? Like it was a soul-searching question. And I said, yeah, how hard could it be? And that right there, that's the sentence that destroys men. How hard could it be? It's the hook that starts every disaster. So I go in there like a hero who's never saved anybody. Grab a screwdriver, because that's the only tool I actually know by name. The handle wiggles once, and I'm like, see, got this. Next thing I know, the screw falls into some kind of parallel universe behind the door frame. Gone forever. I don't know where it went. I tried to look for it, and the doorknob just falls off. Both sides. Now I'm locked inside the bathroom holding two knobs, like I just won a prize I didn't want. I start yelling for my wife, which is embarrassing. I told her I'm doing it. She opens the door from the outside and sees standing there with the doorknob pieces, like I'm doing a magic trick that went wrong. She's like, how did this happen? It was one loose screw. And I said, yeah, well, now it's a journey. At this point, I've somehow broken the door, the handle in my spirit. We have to call an actual handyman, a grown man who knows things, which is the worst part. He walks in, looks at the door for maybe 3 seconds, and goes, yeah, you shouldn't have touched that. Like he's talking to a toddler holding a houseplant upside down. He fixes the whole thing in 5 minutes. 5. Meanwhile, I've spent 2 hours trapped in a bathroom questioning every decision I've made since high school. My wife pays him. As he's leaving, he pats me on the shoulder like I survived something traumatic. And honestly, I did. I survived myself. So now the rule in our house is simple. If something breaks, I don't touch it. I just walk up to it Look at it respectfully, say, not today. Because the truth is, I didn't try to fix one thing. I accidentally tried to remodel the whole house, and the house won. You ever notice how every disaster in life starts with a tiny spark of confidence you absolutely did not earn? That's really where the whole thing begins. They're smart. It's that moment you wake up feeling just a little too proud of yourself for no reason at all. You roll out of bed thinking, today I'm useful. And the universe hears that and immediately starts warming up the popcorn. Because the truth is, nothing gets a man into trouble faster than believing he's capable. It's like a cosmic setup. The second I say, yeah, can fix that, that's the moment my brain should step in and slap me. That sentence has ruined more homes, relationships, Saturday mornings than anything else in human history. How hard could it be? Those are the words that start wars. It's funny, because right before everything goes wrong, there's always this sense of heroism that washes over you. You feel like you're the chosen one. You step toward the broken handle, pipe, or shelf with the confidence of someone who has literally never succeeded at this before. The hook is always the same. You walk into the situation like it owes you respect. You puff your chest a little. You put your hands on your hips because every man thinks the superhero pose automatically makes him qualified. You look at the broken thing and think, you picked the wrong house today. And deep down, even the broken thing is like, no. There's something hilarious about how the mind convinces you it's going to be a simple job. You start narrating your own life like you're in a commercial for a tool brand you've never used. You hype yourself up. All right, this will take 5 minutes. Every time someone says 5 minutes, life adds an hour. It's a trap, but you can't help it. You believe. And that belief is the most dangerous thing. It's the same confidence that made you think you could assemble IKEA furniture without the manual. It's the same confidence that made you try to carry all the grocery bags at once. It's the confidence that got you stuck in a revolving door that one time. It has betrayed you your entire life, but for some reason, you still trust it. What makes it worse is that people around you start feeding that confidence. Your wife looks at you and gently asks, "Are you sure?" And you hear it as a challenge, not concern, not love, a challenge. Your pride gets involved immediately, like it just clocked in for work. Suddenly, you're defending your honor over a loose screw. You say, "Yeah, of course I'm sure." But inside, your soul is trying to tunnel its way out of your body. You give a speech like you're running for office. "I can fix this. I've fixed things before." And even while you're saying it, you know you're lying. Everybody knows you're lying. The neighbor probably feels it through the walls. But right there, in that exact moment, that overconfidence becomes the real of the whole disaster, because you commit. You have no choice now. You said it out loud. The words existed in the world. And the moment you walk toward that doorknob or shelf or whatever it is, you're stepping into the plot twist of your own life. You're not just fixing something simple. No. You're walking straight into a story you definitely didn't sign up for, but you're in it now. And once that confidence fades, once reality hits you in the face, there's no going back. That's where the chaos begins. There's always that moment, right after you hype yourself up, right after you convince everyone you know what you're doing, when you walk over to the toolbox like you're about to perform a medical procedure. And the hook is simple. You grab the one tool you actually recognize, the screwdriver. It's the celebrity of tools. It's the only one most of us could identify in a police lineup. You hold it like it's your badge of honor. The moment you wrap your hand around it, you instantly become qualified. And the screwdriver knows this, knows you have no idea what you're doing. It's seen men like you before. Smart. There's something hilarious about how confidently you pick it up. You don't even check if it's the right type. Phillips. Flathead, star-shaped ancient Egyptian artifact. Who knows? Who cares? You just grab the one that looks like a screwdriver because in your mind, they all do the same thing. You stand there like a surgeon who skipped med school, but watched a lot of hospital shows. The whole situation becomes this cinematic moment. You holding a tool you don't respect, facing a problem that doesn't respect you. You start turning the screw with the kind of confidence only a person who is completely unqualified can have. The hook always hits right here. That little illusion of competence, that lie you tell yourself. You haven't fixed anything in years. Your greatest mechanical achievement was replacing batteries in a remote. But suddenly you think you're a handyman because you're holding a piece of metal with a handle. The screwdriver becomes your wand. You wave it around like you're about to cast a spell. You talk to yourself. Yeah, easy. You're basically giving yourself a TED Talk on home repair. The screwdriver is the only one in the audience. But the real comedy is how fast that false confidence fades. The second you feel that screw resist, just a tiny bit, you panic internally. You don't show it, of course. Outwardly, you stay cool. You squint at the screw like it personally offended you. You adjust your grip like that's the issue. You mutter something like, huh, interesting, as if you've encountered a complex engineering problem. Not a bathroom handle. That's the point where the screwdriver becomes the hook of your failure. The more you turn it, the worse things get. It slips, it strips, it makes a sound you've never heard before. And every time something goes wrong, you blame the screwdriver. No man has ever said, "Nobi, I'm the issue." No. You say things like, "They don't make tools like they used to," even though you've never lived in a time when you needed one. Then comes the worst moment of all. The moment you switch screwdrivers, even though you still don't know which one is correct. You go back to the toolbox, dig around like you're searching for buried treasure, grab a different one, march back like it's a fresh start, as if swapping screwdrivers suddenly gives you a degree. You try again. It still doesn't work. Now, the screw is making sounds like it's begging for mercy. You keep twisting, convincing yourself you're making progress, even though the screw is basically melting. And that's when it hits you. Not only do you not know how to fix anything, you might actually be making things much worse. The screwdriver becomes this symbol of your downfall. It's no longer a tool. It's a reminder that you had no plan, no skill, no business touching anything in the first place. But you keep going because now your pride is involved. Once pride shows up, logic leaves the building. At that moment, you're not repairing something. You're fighting for your dignity. But the screwdriver always wins, every time. There's always that one moment in every simple fix where the universe decides it's time to humble you. And in this story, that moment arrives the second the screw disappears. You loosen it, barely, gently, performing delicate surgery, and then it just drops, not onto the floor where normal earthbound objects go. No, it vanishes into some mysterious gap behind the door frame, like it got sucked into a portal that only screws know about. You just stand there staring at the empty space thinking, there's no way that happened. But it did. That's the hook that pulls you deeper into the disaster, because losing that one screw is the exact moment you realize you are no longer fixing anything. You're now part of an ongoing investigation. There's a special kind of panic that comes with losing a screw inside a wall. First, you try to play it cool. You bend down slowly, pretending you're just checking the floor like a detective examining a crime scene. You run your hand around the tile, hoping maybe it bounced, even though you watched it disappear like a magic trick. You check the corners, the edges, the shadows, places the screw could never logically be. You start looking in areas so far away that even your brain is like, and every time you come up empty, the embarrassment grows. Then the denial kicks in. You tap the wall softly, as if the screw is gonna knock back. You shake the doorknob like maybe it's still hiding inside the mechanism. At this point, you're basically trying to negotiate with physics, whispering, "Come on, man, I need you." But the screw is gone. It's moved on. It found a new life behind the wall where it never has to deal with you again. And this is where the comedy really takes off, because the moment that screw disappears, your confidence disappears with it. You feel it leave your body. You're suddenly aware of how unprepared you are. One missing screw, and your entire sense of competence evaporates. You start sweating like the room temperature just doubled. You look around hoping no one saw, even though you were alone. Because this is the kind of mistake you don't even want witnesses for. You try the thing everyone tries. You tilt your head and squint as if looking at the problem from a different angle will magically reveal the screw. It never works, but we all do it. When that fails, you do the desperate move using your phone flashlight. You shine it into the crack even though you already know there's nothing there. You lie to yourself. Maybe it's just stuck on a ledge. There is no ledge. There has never been a ledge. You know this, but hope makes you foolish. But the real hook in this moment is what happens next. You go from searching for the screw to accepting it's gone forever. That's when the panic turns into resignation. That's when you mutter something like, "All right, well, we didn't need that one." You start convincing yourself the screw wasn't that important, even though the entire structural integrity of the doorknob depended on it. This is denial at its peak. You go from handyman to motivational speaker. Everything happens for a reason. Maybe the screw needed to leave. Meanwhile, the doorknob is dangling like it's begging for help. And just when you think the situation can't get worse, it does, because losing the screw is the first domino. The moment you touch the door again, the whole doorknob falls off, both sides. There you are, holding two metal circles like weird bathroom trophies, realizing that losing that screw was not just a tiny setback, it was the beginning of an entire journey you didn't sign up for. At that moment, the screw is long gone, but your pride goes right along with it. There's a very specific second in every home repair disaster when you realize things aren't just going wrong, they're accelerating. They've picked up momentum. It's like the problem has been waiting for you, stretching, warming up, thinking, "All right, let's ruin his afternoon." And the hook always hits the moment you try to fix the situation after losing the screw. You tell yourself it's still salvageable. You convince yourself you're one careful move away from turning everything around. And that's exactly when the doorknob decides to give up on life. It doesn't loosen, it doesn't wobble. It just falls on completely both sides, dropping into your hands like the door is quitting you. There's nothing that humbles a person faster then standing alone in a bathroom holding two disconnected doorknob pieces. You look down at them like they betrayed you, like they should have warned you they were this fragile. And in that moment, you don't even know what step you took to cause it. You barely touched it. You breathed on it. Somehow, your existence was enough to make the whole structure collapse. And the worst part, you can actually feel the disaster happening in slow motion. 1 second, you're tightening something with false confidence. The next second, you're holding the remains of what used to be a functional piece of hardware. Comes the internal panic you try so hard not to show. You try to keep a calm face like everything is fine. You stand there frozen, replaying every decision you've made in the last 5 minutes. You start bargaining with the doorknob like it's a hostage situation. Okay, let's not freak out. We can fix this. We're in this together. You're talking to metal now, which is a sign things have escalated emotionally. Then you try the most embarrassing move of all. You attempt to put the pieces back on like nothing happened. You push them against the door, hoping some miracle of physics will kick in and they'll stay. They don't. They fall. You try again. They fall again. You do this 3 or 4 times, as if repetition will eventually solve the problem. It won't, but you still do it because hope makes you irrational. And then comes the moment every man dreads. You realize you're stuck. They're smartly. You're locked inside the bathroom because the only way out is a doorknob you personally destroyed. Each time you try to wiggle the latch with your finger like you know what you're doing, you don't. The latch does not move. You start shaking the door like you're trying to escape a movie villain. Nothing happens. That's when you feel the humility settle in. You call for your wife, but you don't want to. You know she's going to walk in and see you standing there like a child who broke something at a fancy store. You try to call casually, hey, can you come here real quick? But there's no real quick with this. She opens the door from the outside, and the look on her face is exactly what you feared. Equal parts disappointment, confusion, amusement. She sees you holding the doorknob pieces like you're presenting evidence in a trial. She asks, what happened? And you have no answer. You want to respond, but the truth is too embarrassing to say out loud. I touched it and everything fell apart. It sounds like a metaphor for your entire life. This is the hook that completes the disaster the moment you realize you didn't fix anything. You didn't repair anything. You didn't improve anything. All you did was take a perfectly manageable problem and upgrade it into a full-scale situation requiring outside help. And now, standing there with broken parts in your hands, the reality hits. You aren't fighting a doorknob anymore. You're fighting destiny. Then comes the professional. That person whose mere presence makes you question every life choice you've ever made. You call for help, maybe reluctantly. A handyman shows up like a hero in khakis, armed with tools, knowledge, and the confidence that only someone who has seen it all could have. A hook hits instantly when he walks in and doesn't even need to speak to assess the situation. One glance at the dangling doorknob, one flick of the wrist, and he knows exactly what went wrong. Meanwhile, you're standing there proud of your disaster, still holding the pieces, pretending you had a plan all along. The contrast is brutal. He's calm, efficient, experienced. You're sweating, flustered, still emotionally invested in a screw that doesn't exist anymore. The way professionals do it is fascinating. Move with precision, like they've studied the laws of physics and the psychology of doorknobs. You watch him take out a screwdriver, not the same one you fumbled with. And he doesn't even hesitate. He doesn't tighten it gently like it might get scared. He knows exactly how much pressure to apply. Moves the pieces in a way that seems effortless, like he's performing a magic trick, and suddenly, the doorknob is whole again. Just like that, it takes him maybe 3 to 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Meanwhile, you spent hours building anxiety, destroying parts, and rehearsing excuses. And the hook here is devastating. The longer you watched, the more painfully obvious it becomes that your failure was predictable, inevitable, and entirely unnecessary. What's even funnier is the look he gives you. Not angry, not judgmental, just that casual, knowing look, like he's seen this kind of disaster 1,000 times, and you're a textbook example. It's like he's saying, yeah, this happens. And in that one glance, the humiliation lands. You feel it in your chest. He doesn't even need to talk. Doesn't have to point out the mess you created. He fixes it in silence and leaves you holding your pride, which is still on the floor somewhere under the tools you misused. And the hook keeps coming every second you watched him. You're reminded of how avoidable all this chaos was. Your brain starts replaying every step in slow motion like a highlight reel of incompetence. Then comes the final subtle humiliation. He packs up, smiles politely, and leaves you alone with a functioning door. The room feels quieter, smaller, like it's judging you. You're suddenly hyper-aware of your lack of skill, your impulsiveness, your overconfidence, the irony that you were once proud of attempting this simple fix. And even after he's gone, you can't help but remember the way he moved. Smooth, confident, precise. It's like watching someone perform surgery while you tried to fix a toaster with chopsticks. That comparison alone is enough to make you rethink every DIY project you've ever entertained. And as you stand there, holding the doorknob fully restored, fully functional, fully mocking your past decisions, realize the hook isn't just that he fixed it. The hook is that he made you see the exact moment everything went wrong. Every misstep, every fumble, every ounce of misplaced confidence is replayed vividly in your mind. He's not just a professional fixing a door. He's a living reminder that there are some things in life better left to people who know what they're doing. That lesson, though painful, is delivered with the perfect, silent punchline of efficiency and ease. After witnessing the professional work his magic and restore the doorknob in minutes, a new rule immediately forms in your house, one that doesn't need to be written down, but somehow becomes sacred. The hook here is that disasters like this have a way of creating policies you never intended, rules you didn't know you'd accept, boundaries that protect your dignity. Well, what's left of it anyway? From that day on, it becomes abundantly clear that some things in life are just not for you. Tools, screws, latches, anything with a knob or lever, these objects suddenly have a strict no-go zone, and you are personally banned. You don't argue, you've learned the hard way, and the beauty of this rule is that it's enforced by everyone in the house. Your spouse, neighbors, anyone who witnessed the event, they all silently, subtly enforce it with glances, sighs, even laughing too loudly when you approach anything mechanical. The process of establishing this rule is almost ritualistic. First, you walk past the toolbox and stop. You glance inside with that familiar spark of curiosity because old habits die hard. But the moment you see the screwdrivers, pliers, and hammers lined up innocently, you remember. And the hook strikes again, your mind instantly recalls every misstep, every slip, every second the doorknob dangled hopelessly in your hands. The memory itself becomes a deterrent. You don't need to touch the tools. The tools themselves are like little traps waiting to humiliate you again. You approach them cautiously, like a person walking through a haunted house. And every time you do, the story plays in your head. The missing screw, the falling doorknob, the professional who fixed it in 5 minutes. It's enough to make you step back, shake your head, and mutter under your breath, "Not today, buddy." Then comes the socially reinforced layer of this rule. Whenever something breaks, you have a spectator. Your family members watch with a mix of amusement and relief when you don't even touch it. The hook hits again because every time you resist, there's an unspoken acknowledgement you survived the last disaster. You have learned. Your pride may have taken a hit, but your survival instincts are strong. You now walk past any broken appliance, loose handle, or creaky hinge like a Zen master walking past temptation. It's a combination of fear, respect, humility all rolled into one. Your role in the household shifts subtly. You become the observer, the planner, the one who calls the expert, the grown-up who says, "Let's get someone who knows what they're doing." It's oddly empowering because while you may not be fixing things yourself, you are now managing chaos in the most efficient way possible. Delegation. The hook here is ironic. You thought you were failing by not fixing things, but in reality, you are now succeeding in avoiding disasters that could have cost hours, frustration, and your dignity. And so, this unwritten rule cements itself into daily life. You see a broken handle, and you acknowledge it respectfully. You don't intervene. You don't overestimate your skills. You just call a professional or let someone else handle it. You might even nod approvingly when the tools are in motion, silently appreciating competence without touching it. This is the final stage of the lesson: understanding your limits, respecting expertise, and surviving with your pride mostly intact. Every time you walk past a toolbox, a latch, or a doorknob, that hook lingers, reminding you that some disasters are avoidable only if you know when to walk away. So, after all that, here's the truth. I didn't just try to fix a doorknob. Accidentally turned my bathroom into a disaster zone, proved once again that my confidence is way ahead of my skills, learned the hard way that sometimes it's better to just call someone who actually knows what they're doing. And honestly, that's life, isn't it? You walk in thinking, "I've got this," and then reality taps you on the shoulder and goes, "Not today, buddy." The moral? Some things are better left untouched. Some tools are meant for professionals. If you ever find yourself holding 2 doorknob pieces in your hands, just smile, wave, and call the grown up. Because at the end of the day, I didn't just fix one thing. I created a story I'll never forget and probably never live down.